Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is I, Emily Sophia, aka Mighty Sophia, here to break down for you guys the final Bates Motel premiere. We are on season 5, episode 1, Dark Paradise. So, spoiler alert before I dive into the mad thick of things, as I shall be bearing all in this review. It is so wonderful to be back. I will, in fact, be doing weekly, episode by episode, blow for blow reviews. So stay tuned for those every week. Probably going to be up on Tuesdays, something like that. But yeah, there is so freaking much to discuss. This is probably going to be a lengthy review, but I'm going to try to recap everything that we saw and intertwine my thoughts about those events in the midst of this review. So I am just so elated to have the show back in my life. And it's crazy how there is this fundamental paradigm shift, of course, with Norma Bates as we once knew her being deceased, and now stored in a cold storage throne room, as I like to call it. And now, Mother has taken over. And she is exactly what we would expect, and a few other things that are probably different as well. But I think what is most exciting about this premiere is that we really get to hone in on the Norman and Norma dynamic. And the reason I say Norma in quotes instead of simply referring to her as Mother, the reason I do that is because this woman is a multifaceted being. She is not merely a psychological construct. She is serving so many roles in Norman's mind and assumes so many of Norma's natural quirks and mannerisms, but with these slight changes, these moments of nonchalance where you're like, wait a second, is that really how Norma would react? And then, of course, she is tearing into Norman with everything she's got and is passionate as ever. And it's just thrilling. The fact that even though Norma Bates is gone, we still get Mother, we still get Vera Farmiga, we still get all the things that we fell in love with Norma put on vibrant display in Norman's very interesting psyche. So let's hash out the events of the episode so that I can try to address everything that occurred. So we start off the episode getting to see Norman's gilded domestic fantasy. This is, of course, the Dark Paradise, and we have several different moments throughout the episode where we get to see the fragmented reality, this glistening, beautiful, clean home where Mother is cooking in the kitchen and everything appears to be absolutely normal. But then the facade is peeled back. The camera comes around the corner and we see the squalor and the filth and the disarray that has plagued the Bates manor. And it's just so startling, but good for us as the audience to have these reminders that all is not as it seems. If you ever thought that anything was as it seems, well, be gone with that notion, because we have no time for such one-dimensional realities here. But yeah, there is something far more sinister afoot, but Norman is actually doing a surprisingly good job of managing his business. And I mean, not only the business up here, but the business of the motel. He is running the show and generally doing his best to conceal the fact that his mother is, well, not rotting in the basement. He is giving her the Class A treatment. This woman is living in a dark paradise, much like the dark paradise in which he is living. So meanwhile, we see that good old Alex Romero is working out his frustrations on a punching bag at the Oregon Penitentiary, whichever correctional facility he is at, living that glamorous inmate life. And he has a picture of himself and Norma on the wall of his cell, but unfortunately for our blue-blooded convict, Norman gets Norma all to himself these days. And oh, what wormwood that would be to Romero if only he knew. But of course we know that these two are going to clash down the line. So anyways, after we visit Romero, we see that Norman goes to a hardware, houseware, curiosity shop kind of shindig. Exactly the type of store that you would find in the Pacific Northwest, by the way. I live out here. He goes to pick up some paint so he can spruce stuff up at the hotel. And he glimpses this beautiful young sales clerk whose physicality is very uncannily similar to Norma. So much so that it's clear that the showrunners are trying to play up those parallels to a caricatured degree. It's supposed to be ridiculously comically overt, and it totally is. You know, she's got the vintage floral dress, short blonde hair from behind. She's got all the right credentials because Norma walks up behind her in the store. And he makes her acquaintance and introduces himself as the manager of Bates Motel, which reminds the young associate of Edward Hopper's famous painting, which is The House by the Railroad. And that's actually what inspired Hitchcock in his vision of the Bates estate for Psycho. So that's a fun little Easter egg for y'all in case you didn't pick up on that. But yeah, so Norman comments on how much his late mother would have loved this little place, how she had a fondness for beautiful things. And he says that she had a keen artistic eye and sought out the beauty in the world to combat the ugly things that she couldn't control. That actually kind of reminds me of Dolores from Westworld, you know, like seeing the beauty in the world. So I made that connection there. But yeah, so Norman soon realizes that this young woman is married, and but the store is hers. And her husband isn't really involved in the business, much like how Norman is the sole proprietor of the motel, you know, but his brain is another affair entirely. So the Norma doppelganger ultimately introduces herself as Madeleine, and she is going to be a source of problems and mayhem for days to come. Or who knows how many episodes she's actually going to survive. I haven't looked at IMDb or anything to see how long she actually makes it, but, you know, it's hard to say. So Norman realizes that he is actually in possession of another man's wallet. He discovers this as he's trying to pay for his paints. An innocent mistake, he assures Madeleine, so he rushes off to find his own. No trouble there. And then meanwhile, we see that Romero is trying and failing to place a call. And we discover what that call is all about later in the episode. So Norman returns to question Mother about how he managed to misplace his wallet. Very natural. I love this scene. I love this scene in the episode. And yeah, Norma confirms that it is indeed a stranger's wallet, and Norman has no recollection of the man. And at this point, Norman's getting super agitated, whereas Mother is incredibly calm. She's cleaning things up, again, keeping things beautiful. And Norman says, "Mother, do you have the feeling that you've had the same nightmare over and over again, but you can't remember it? Just remember the feeling of it?" To which Mother is just like, "Nope." And this is why I freaking adore Vera Farmiga, because you get these moments constantly with her, and Mother is just so funny to me, at least in this episode. She's also very terrifying and ferocious, as we see later on, but that just tickled my funny bone in a way that I did not expect. But yeah, so Mother reminds Norman, of course, that his memory's failing and just tells him to relax. So one facet of Mother that's super interesting is the protective side of her. She is the micromanager and trying to tell Norman, like, okay, here's what you have to do to remain assimilated into society. But she is also the same Bermuda Triangle in which he is getting lost. And so I love that dichotomous nature of her that comes on display in this episode alone. It's really friggin' cool. So then we go to Dylan's house party. He got a promotion at work. It's Emma's birthday, and the happy couple now have a baby daughter, which is quite lovely. And no sooner do we get to see this pleasantness that Caleb arrives. Of freaking course, right on cue. You gotta love those unexpected family visits, and this show is no different in that regard. You know, so he's like trying not to be creepy. He just saw the pictures on Facebook and everything looks so lovely, to which I say, you just don't. I have never had an ounce of sympathy for Caleb. That's just me personally. I know that the show has tried so hard to humanize him, but it is still not flying for me. I'm sorry. But yeah, unfortunately for him, he doesn't know that Norma Louise is out of the picture, and he asks to crash on the couch and, you know, the stuff that deadbeat dad, uncle, creeper, evil men do. But anyway, so Norman's trying to do some detective work. He's unsettled by the mysterious acquisition of the wallet. And it's interesting because he has a pocketbook where he's keeping track of his blackouts. So this is sort of a way that he is trying to take care of himself, to keep himself out of trouble with the law. So even though he is losing control, there's a side of him that is attempting very much to keep himself on track and to maintain this tenuous dark paradise that he has forged with Mother. And yeah, we go back to Alex, crooked cop Romero, and his parole has been denied, and he continues to wield his fists of fury on the prison courtyard, and all's well there. What else could you expect? Yeah, so Norman, going back to him, he's trying to tie up loose ends, one of which pertains to an order of luminol, that delightful old phenyl barbitol, and he definitely did not place that. Not in the slightest. So while he's agonizing over that, some dude shows up looking to rent a room for a couple hours, but Norman balks at the idea. This is not that kind of establishment, he says. And I think that's a little bit of Mother coming out, you know, like trying to keep up the reputation, keep up the appearances, do everything that Norma would do. And so the guy has resigned, and he decides to step things up to a room for the night. Even better, completely above board. And he introduces himself as David Davison. We can assume that this is Sam Loomis from the original story. So after the gentleman drops a Benjamin and a Jackson for the night, Norman watches him bring his companion into the room. Now, we don't actually know for sure if that's Marion Crane or if it's just some chick he's having a one-night stand with. Remains yet to be seen at this point. Again, I have actually avoided IMDb at all costs because I don't want to know too much in advance about what Rihanna's role is going to look like in the show. So I'm trying to keep that a surprise for me. But yeah, so Norman removes this painting and he watches the couple through this friggin' face-sized hole in the wall. Not even a little conspicuous. And then he is rudely interrupted by a call from none other than Mother, which is a very comical moment there. So he hurries back to the house where Mother is preparing a scrumptious banquet, and Norman confronts her about the luminol order. Surely that purchase was her doing, of course. And then Mother suggests that Norman take his medications again, but we know exactly what that would entail, and that is something that Norman is not about. So Mother sees the paint swatches that Norman collected at the hardware store and immediately begins to inquire about the seller when Norman lets it slip that it was indeed a female shopkeeper, Madeleine, who picked out the color shades. And he says that she's nice and artistic. And he's trying to beat around the freaking bush, but guess who else is hiding in the bush of his brain? So Mother presses for information, of course, about this young woman's age, and Norman quickly goes on the defensive when Mother gets all passive-aggressive, emphasis on the latter. This is yet another delicious scene in more ways than one, because not only is it like this banquet shindig, but we really get to see the saucy, sassy side of his brain, Norma, come out to play. So Norman asks what's wrong with Mother. And she goes frickin' off on the guy. She's like, what's wrong with me? Well, let me see. For starters, I'm dead. And why am I pretending to be dead? So I can get away from everyone and everything that could distract me from you. Thesis statement right there. So Mother's feeling a bit underappreciated, which is understandable. She is confined to the paradise, but, you know, it's not exactly working for her in every possible respect. And she says that she's going nuts. Makes sense to me. And then another line of hers that I adore was like, a mentally ill boy and a dead woman. We're actually doing it. And just in that tone of voice, this flippant, offhanded way that Vera Farmiga so beautifully does everything. It's definitely a less than likely success story that they have going on, and maybe by thinking that, Norman's trying to pat himself on the back a little bit. But Mother actually begins to cry after she lashes out, and she asks Norman just how far he thinks he can get with having other people in his life, because she is his life in so many more ways than one. Not to mention the arrival of strange new women jeopardizes Mother's prime directive, which is, in fact, protecting Norman, and that becomes very clear in this episode. So Norman that night shares the bed with Mother, but as soon as he gets up and leaves the bedroom, of course, we see the squalor and the awfulness that he's living in, and Mother herself disappears. And we also see an overturned bottle of luminol on the dresser. So is that pertaining to Mystery Dude or to even somebody else? Because some time has passed. So ostensibly, we could be catching him in the midst of his atrocities, but it's hard to tell at this point. So Norman descends the dark stairs to the basement, and he goes to the throne room from which his undying queen rules. And the set design is crazy. I mean, it's really dark, this deep kind of indigo blue, so it's very hard to see everything. But with what little light we do have, we can just see the ornate decoration and how much he venerates his mother, almost even worshiping her. And I was talking to my friend Austin about, what are the mechanics of Norman escaping from the mother in his mind to go visit the body of Norma. And I actually have, I wrote these down because we were messaging back and forth, and I have some ideas as to what the purpose of that is. And I think that it's sort of a coping mechanism when there is strife between himself and the Norma chimera. And it's like he uses her body as a totem to kind of anchor his fantasy when he's afraid that it's going to abandon him, like a little bit of Inception there. Maybe he's trying to atone for his actions by willing himself to commune with Norma's dead body, and even showing Mother what he's sacrificing in return for her unadulterated devotion. It's possible that even the physical contact itself is enough to compensate for the limitations of his reality. The entire situation is so mind-boggling to me, and I think it's really, really fun to discuss and to explore that. But yeah, so Dylan and Emma, we see them talking about Caleb's abrupt arrival in Seattle, and they get the sense that he wants to be near them, but even so, that would force them to be honest with him about what happened to Norma. And Dylan reveals that Caleb footed a substantial amount of Emma's medical bill at that point. So he can't, in good conscience, just turn this man away despite everything he's done. To which I say, bullshit, but that's just me. So anyways, Norman is looking for clues of Mother's mischief when Madeleine arrives with some complimentary paint samples. And he never had the chance to pay her, and finally completes the transaction, but not without offering to walk old Mads to her car. And Madeleine, of course, is enamored with the architecture of the house, but Norman doesn't feel comfortable showing her around, and with good reason. This feeling is reinforced by Mother gazing down at him from one of the second-story windows. And Madeleine, she's completely unfazed and invites him to this small business owners meeting in town, and Norman politely expresses interest but isn't sure that he can get away. I love those euphemisms, and they are aplenty here. So Emma catches Caleb having a late night snack at their house, and she takes the opportunity to thank him for funding her surgery. And everything's all sweet and saccharine and heartwarming until Emma breaks the news, to which I say thank you, because I was going to be so pissed if this was just another attempt on the show's part to humanize this guy. I got it out for him. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry at all. But yeah, he can't stay. And she knows that Caleb is putting Dylan in what she calls an impossible position, since Dylan would have to live a lie with their daughter and mask Caleb's real identity. And fortunately, Caleb does actually seem to grasp the gravity of the situation, and he doesn't try to ingratiate himself further or, kind of noodle his way into their lives even more. He realizes that, okay, he's not wanted. Inevitably, this is going to lead to him returning to White Pine Bay, and stuff is going to get off the chain, but I really, really want to see Mother dispose of Caleb. I feel like it could definitely happen. I don't know with 100% certainty but the show has worked so hard to get us to support him and like him that I feel like it's setting us up for him to be dispatched. But I say that's exactly what I want. Just give it to me. But hey, that's the way my brain is working. I don't know if any of you guys have more sympathy for Caleb than I do. But I have never had it for him. So that's just me. So anyways, Norman decides that he's going to try and make a break for the small business owners meeting. Mother is, of course, skeptical. She's sitting there on the couch knitting or something. She tells him that if he goes, he shouldn't take the car. And, it's very practical advice considering the blackouts and all. And Norman clings to his defiance and decides that he's going to get behind the wheel anyway. And that's when, in this beautiful horror movie moment, he finds Mother standing directly behind the car. It was kind of this jump scare moment that I both expected and didn't. So it was very effective and thrilling in my book. But yeah, so she says, if you're not going to live by the rules, then I'm not going to live by the rules. And this is in regards to her actually leaving the confines of the house where Norman has psychologically imprisoned her, essentially. And she's just kind of all breezy about it, like, dude, what the crap is your problem? And it's just so fascinating to kind of get outside of the situation and outside of what we're actually seeing and thinking about how Norman is telling himself these things through Norma. It's just, I love it. I love the dual narrative that's going on, and it's going to run through the rest of the season and just make it so exciting and fun. But yeah, so she ends up dragging him by the ear back to the basement after she gets the upper hand, telling Norman that she knows everything about him. And yeah, she flings open the door of the freezer, bringing him to terms with what he did the fateful night that he was hanging up the shower curtains. And this is where things get very bloody. And Norman, he doesn't want to remember this situation, much less look in the icebox, but turns out that the man, mystery man whose wallet he had, was an assassin who showed up to kill him. And Mother was the one who did the dirty work. And at this point, as everything is crashing down for Norman, he screams, "What is wrong with us, Mother?" And she's like, "I don't know." And it's just this terrible, tragic moment. But I gotta say, the scene of Mother taking over in that hotel room with just the flashing, pulsating lights, it was almost like seizure-inducing, very extreme visuals. And her just stabbing over and over and like the blood spattered everywhere. It felt very Lynchian to me. Is that safe to say? I've actually finally watched Twin Peaks, so I'm probably going to start drawing many other parallels between the shows, because now I actually know why everyone said that these two shows just kind of dovetail together in terms of style. And I see that so much now. And yeah, just watching that whole moment with Norma was phenomenal. And just so good. such a perfect scene to include in the premiere, of course. And so Mother at this point reminds her errant son that they are all each other has. That has been the full crux of the show since day one. And despite the Norman Romero romance that we watched unfold in the previous season, we know where it's really at. Where the intrigue and the sensuality and seduction really lies, let me tell you. But yeah, so Norman is trying to console Mother at this point as everything has come flooding back to him. And she tells him at this point, when he's like, what do we do? Like, well, it's not like we haven't done this before. We just gotta get rid of him. Actually, I don't remember if that was Norman saying it to Mother or vice versa, but hey, they're one and the same, so I'm gonna forgive myself there. But yeah, so she insists that she had originally wanted the car so she could dispose of the body for Norman, which is just kind of mind-boggling to think about, like the timeline that would essentially be constructed in Norman's mind if she had gone... Well, it's not... Okay. I'm making things way more confusing than they have to be. But still, I just find it so interesting that there are these points where he is, like, super dissociated from this version of Mother that he's clinging on to. But yeah, so we get to close out the episode with a mother-son murder duo dealing with the corpse to the tune of Etta James' At Last, which is very lovely. The, at last, my love is come along, my lonely days are gone. I love that song, so forgive me there. But anyway, so they row out into the middle of the lake to dump the hitman. Rest in peace. And Norman is still puzzled as to why somebody would try to kill him, because this is not him simply going after someone or doing something in a mother-induced jealous rage. But, you know, Mother's still totally nonplussed by the situation. Like, she is trying to protect Norman by reeling him in and getting him to underreact to a very dangerous situation. But before they can send the body to Davy Jones' locker, the man's phone rings and Norman decides to answer, only to discover the identity of the man who put the hit in the first place. Mr. Romero. It all makes sense, baby. So the war is on at this point, but yeah, I am just utterly pleased with the premiere. It was stylish and extravagant and thought-provoking and even silly at turns, and we are setting up all the players on the chessboard of White Pine Bay for some serious excitingness. I keep using that word, and I apologize. I'm a bit of a broken record at this point. What can I say? I'm in love, and sometimes love breaks, yeah. So thank you very much for watching this review. If there's any analytical stuff that you guys want to delve into about this show, things that you picked up on that I did not, I would love to know those things. So bring them up in the comments below. We'll chat it up. Yeah, so in the future, expect my Bates Motel reviews on Tuesdays because, so I watched this episode early because it leaked, which is bad. But yeah, it's going to be coming on 10 o'clock on Monday nights, I think. So it's going to be late for me. But yeah, stay tuned for those. I'm going to be doing an update video soon to apprise you all of what shows I'm going to be reviewing on a weekly basis and what shows I'm going to be reviewing on a season basis. Because that is a change that I'm bringing to my channel in the near future. So if you couldn't already tell. But anyways, I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, please. And as always, I'll be back before you know it.